Lost in the primeval forests of North America, a small plant eater stands no chance of survival. Stalked by swift juvenile hunters, it is driven straight into the waiting jaws of a giant 5 times its size. The kill is made, and one dinosaur family prepares to eat. The world these dinosaurs lived in disappeared long ago, but parts of it are still there, buried and protected for all that time, its secrets kept by the bones. These are the Badlands of North America, rugged, eroded terrain that's perfect for dinosaur hunting. It is here, in a few small patches of rock, that the fossilized skeletons of 4 different kinds of dinosaur babies have been found. They are very rare discoveries, even in dinosaur country. Paleontologist Jack Horner has been digging up dinosaurs for nearly 3 decades in the rough formations of northern Montana. Horner's first major discovery on a cattle ranch near the town of Choteau was his most famous: baby dinosaurs. The site allowed him to reconstruct the family life of these animals. It changed the way the world thought of dinosaurs.
This is the 1978 nest. This is the first nest that we actually found of Maiasaura.
Made from mud 75 million years ago, the dinosaur nest has now turned to stone, but it preserved evidence of ancient lives.
Out of this little hole right here, we excavated 15 baby dinosaurs.
The hole was full of tiny dinosaur bones and bits of eggshell. Horner's crew excavated the whole area and uncovered the remains of 40 nests. The babies were part of a vast dinosaur colony.
Judging from the distance that we find them from one another, there were probably hundreds, if not even over 1,000 individuals that nested here. You can imagine this nesting ground, babies, 24 at a pop in each nest, just making lots and lots of racket, and the adult dinosaurs honking and communicating with one another.
The babies looked like no other known dinosaur. When a full-grown skull was found nearby, Horner knew that they had discovered a new species. They named it Maiasaura. Maiasaura had a wide, horny beak. It was a member of a family of dinosaurs called duckbills. But Maiasaura's long snout, small nose hole, and flat head distinguished it from other duck-billed dinosaurs. Scientists knew that this was a plant eater, from the flat, rugged teeth designed for grinding up vegetation. Adult Maiasaura were as tall as a modern male elephant, but twice as long. Compared to their parents, the babies were extremely small. The first 15 babies Horner found were 1 meter, or about 3 feet long, the length of a small dog. A few weeks into the dig, Horner's team found a second group of babies, also in a nest. These were only half the size of the first babies. He suspected that they had just come out of their eggs.
A Maiasaur egg is about this big. It's about the size of an ostrich egg.
By measuring the bits of dinosaur eggshell, They could verify the size of a newly hatched myosaur.
Once we had confirmation of the size of the egg, that was evidence that the babies were about a half a meter long when they hatched out and stayed in their nest until they were a meter long.
The babies had doubled in size while they were still in the nest.
And obviously the easiest answer to explain babies in a nest-like structure would be that they had always been there and that the parent had brought food to them. The alternative hypothesis would have to be that the babies got out of their nest, went and got food on their own, which certainly there's nothing wrong with that hypothesis other than the fact that each of these babies is tiny, has no defense mechanism, and probably would be pretty much like meals on wheels for meat-eating dinosaurs.
Crocodiles and other living reptiles have been the traditional models for understanding dinosaur behavior. Most reptiles do not care for their young. Turtles, for instance, lay eggs and then abandon them, leaving the babies on their own. But baby myosaurs could not have been on their own, so Horner looked to a different parenting model: birds. Most birds brood, keeping their eggs warm in the nest. The amount of care adults provide hatchlings depends on whether the babies are nest-bound or whether they're able to leave the nest and feed themselves. The idea that young myosaurs needed to be cared for required further research. Back at the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman, Montana, Horner has stored an extensive collection of myosaur bones. There are many complete skeletons, so scientists know about the body structure of these dinosaurs. But to understand how the babies actually moved about, Horner turned to the study of today's big flightless birds and the work of researcher Cynthia Marshall.
The reason we study ostriches in this lab is that ostriches provide a proxy for dinosaur growth that we need if we want to study how dinosaurs might have grown. And so we look at ostriches and emus because they're big, they're fast-growing.
The growth rates of these big birds are also under consideration by paleontologists as a model for dinosaur development.
In this hand, I have the skull of a 2-week-old ostrich chick. And here I have the skull from an adult ostrich. This guy grows to this size in a year. They grow very quickly, very large, and evidence shows that dinosaurs also grew very quickly.
Leg bones are another indication of an animal's need for parental care.
Well, these bones are the leg bones from an ostrich, and what we're looking at are how the bones, particularly this bone here, which is equivalent to our shin bone, how this bone grows in birds that are independent when they hatch and how they grow in birds that are taken care of by their parents when they hatch. Because birds that are independent have to have good solid bone to run around on when they hatch.
Baby emus have strong legs only a few hours after hatching. The ends of their leg bones are fully formed and strong enough to allow the babies to be independent. But like the Myosaura, young nest-bound birds are quite defenseless. Until their legs become strong enough to support them, they depend totally on their parents.
One of the things we discovered was that the ends of the baby bones, they were actually made of cartilage, a calcified cartilage structure, which is very weak.
The weakness of their bones meant that the babies were not strong enough to leave the nest.
It was pretty clear that the dinosaurs couldn't have been out walking around getting food on their own.
For the first time, paleontologists had physical evidence that these dinosaurs cared for their young. They were parents who provided food, shelter, and protection. Myosaurs fully deserve their name, which means good mother lizard. Myosaura nested in western North America. during the Cretaceous time period, around 75 million years ago. A large part of the Great Plains were covered by a wide, shallow seaway that extended from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean. Lowlands beside the seacoast were lush and swampy, fed by rivers that were draining down from the young Rocky Mountains to the west. The flat central plain was Maiasaur territory. Their ancient environment is now preserved in the physical features of the eroded rocks. By studying the sediments left behind by the rivers, geologist Jim Schmidt can figure out where and how they flowed.
The rocks on the hill slope behind me here, on the lower portion of that hill slope, are the deposits of river environments, river channels and river floodplains. The river environment that existed here when the Maiasaur were present extended from as far as you can see in this direction to as far as you can see off into the horizon in the opposite direction. Basically, the rivers were everywhere. The Maiasaur were essentially walking around on the top of this dried up river channel bed and squishing the sand beneath their feet and deforming the sand into little undulations.
Trampled by the dinosaur's foot, the ancient sandbank is still there, turned to sandstone.
And it's on floodplains where dinosaurs built their nesting grounds, very similar to us nowadays building houses and housing developments along rivers and getting flooded. The Maiasaur housing developments also got flooded.
These floods and storms did cause the death of many Maiasaurs. But the mud they deposited was what preserved the skeletons. A year after the first babies were found, Horner's team began excavating nearby at another Maiasaur fossil site. It turned out to be a massive accumulation of bones. Horner estimates that they are the remains of thousands of animals.
Because we can hypothesize that we have 10 to 15,000 individuals that died together at a single time, we can hypothesize that they lived together as a group 75 million years ago. Now, if you take 10 to 15,000 plant-eating animals of any kind nowadays, put them anywhere, you know that they have to move from one area to another to acquire food.
These dinosaurs must have been migrating in herds, devouring the vegetation along the way. The bone bed also contained clues about how this particular herd of Maiasaurs may have died.
Chemical tests have been done over that whole area, and it has been determined that it is a single catastrophic event.
Volcanic eruption was the scientists' first thought because of nearby volcanic formations. Further evidence suggested a big storm or a flood, but not just an ordinary flood.
Those bones are mixed together with rocks as large as boulders. And so the entire floodplain in all directions was in essence inundated by this slurry of mud and bones and boulders.
The fact that these large, heavy boulders are all mixed in with the Maiasaur bones indicates that both the bones and the rocks were transported together. It would have taken a tremendous force to move them and pile them all up.
Perhaps there was a tsunami, which is kind of analogous to a marine tidal wave. And we know that there were active volcanoes, and active volcanoes commonly generate earthquakes. And so it's possible that earthquake activity may have induced underwater landslides that produce these tsunami waves that rush on shore. The catastrophic and high energy nature of this large flood is shown to us in this excavation into the Maiasaura bone bed. Here we can see these large leg bones of adult Maiasaura jumbled together with large boulders of rock that were picked up during the flood. These were all mixed together, broken against one another, and deposited as the Maiasaura bone bed.
Just north of where the Maiasaur fossils were discovered, the prairies of northern Montana stretch across the US-Canada border into southern Alberta. Evidence of the family life of another big plant-eating dinosaur was found here in 1987, quite by accident. At the time, Wendy Sloboda was a 19-year-old student out exploring the Badlands near her parents' farm.
I like finding stuff, and I seem to find lots. I get lucky. I think it's luck. It's where you put your foot and where you look at the right time. And plus, you got to know what you're looking for.
Among the crags and boulders of a windy ravine called Devil's Coulee, Wendy discovered dinosaur eggshell. Her summer job with the research crew had taught her to be on the lookout for the fossilized shell, but when she actually found some, she didn't believe that's what it was.
It was black, thin, about as thick as chicken egg, maybe a little thicker with bumps on it. And I'm like, oh, this looks like dinosaur eggshell.
The eggshell was shown to experts at Alberta's Royal Tyrrell Museum. They rushed to the site immediately and found remnants of 3 nests full of eggshell. They kept digging for 3 weeks, but it wasn't until the last day that technician Kevin Ollenbach made a major discovery.
I noticed beside me a lower leg bone, and I picked it up. I then proceeded to look up over my left shoulder, and sticking out of the hill above me was an actual egg with an embryo bone sticking right out of it.
Ollenbach led the museum's head of dinosaur research, Philip Curry, to the location.
We went halfway up the hill, and as we climbed higher, we started finding little bits of eggshell and tiny little baby bones all over the side of the hill. And finally we got to the level where in the hillside you could see a nice circle of eggshell. And in the middle of that circle of eggshell were a series of articulated tail bones from a duck-billed dinosaur. And I can remember that being one of the most exciting moments in my life. I was just beside myself. We all were.
Wendy had stumbled upon the nesting ground of a duck-billed dinosaur called Hipacrosaurus. It was the first dinosaur nesting site ever found in Canada. Once there, the team made an even more important find.
Devil's Coulee, in fact, represented the first time that we had identifiable duck-billed dinosaur embryos inside the eggs.
What we have here is the neck region of the embryo with the vertebrae. Coming down into the body, you can see the forearms sticking out in this area here. A lot of the ribs coming through, going down into the hip region, down through here with the vertebrae again. Coming out into the legs, and here we have a limb bone coming off the end. Over here, you can actually see the actual eggshell.
Further excavations at Devil's Coulee uncovered adult Hipacrosaurus bones and evidence of a large nesting ground.
I think what a lot of people don't realize is just how important this site is. We have baby dinosaurs inside eggs, we've got hatch dinosaurs, and we've got adult dinosaurs in the same site.
The team has found about 20 Hipacrosaur nests at Devil's Coulee. The complete nests contained from 25 to 30 eggs. Most of the baby bones were uncrushed and beautifully preserved. Inside some of the eggs, there were complete skeletons. They were ready to hatch.
This is my favorite specimen out of Devil's Coulee so far. It's a little skull, which is articulated, of one of these embryos. And we can see this, for example, is the right lower jaw. And up here, we have the left lower jaw. And right about there should be the eye, the lower edge of the eye.
An adult Hypacrosaur looked very different from its babies. It was crowned with a large crest which covered its nasal passages. Coupled with a hollow chamber, it probably served to amplify the dinosaur's calls, like a trumpet or a wind instrument. But the babies had no such crown. The crest only started to develop as the animal grew. At the nestling stage, Hypacrosaurus had a crest that was just starting to form. By the time the animal was half grown, the crest was more prominent and the bill was longer and flatter. The very tall headgear finally formed at the time of sexual maturity. By then, the adults would have been capable of making the great resonating calls that scientists think were important for attracting mates or protecting territory. The skull of the little Hypacrosaur also gave Currie and other scientists a surprising glimpse at something that the embryo was actually doing inside the egg.
What's really cool about this specimen is that even though it was found inside the egg, when we look at the surface of the teeth, they're already ground flat. This little dinosaur was grinding its teeth inside the egg.
Because the grinding surfaces of its teeth were already prepared, the baby was able to chew plants as soon as it hatched. The ground-down teeth were just part of a sophisticated tooth structure, designed for chewing up vegetation.
Hypacrosaurs had a magnificent system for chewing up plants, and it's almost unequaled. Basically, if you look at a jaw, what you can see is this nice grinding surface across here, and it's rough, where the enamel is wearing down at one rate, and the dentine inside each tooth is wearing down at a different rate, so you end up with a rough surface. And as the teeth wore down, though, they got replaced from below. So throughout the life of this animal, it has a good grinding surface for eating any kind of plant it could possibly want to eat. It's the perfect system.
The plants of the time have also been fossilized. They suggest that the Hypacrosaurs would have been eating from broadleaf trees, soft-needled evergreens, and ferns. This wealth of vegetation meant that the Hypacrosaurs could thrive and grow. The babies had a lot of catching up to do to reach the size of their huge parents.
In front of me here we have a femur from a large, but not the largest, of the duckbill dinosaurs. This upper leg bone indicates that this baby dinosaur was in fact no bigger than a goose. But if we compare that to the adult leg bone shows us this animal was bigger than most elephants. Now, for these animals to grow from this size to this size with the minimum chance of being eaten or stepped on, they're going to have to grow awfully fast.
Fast growth rates are a characteristic that distinguishes duck-billed dinosaurs from today's reptiles.
It suggests that these animals were doubling their size every couple of months during their first few years of growth. These are the kind of growth rates that we see in modern mammals and birds. They're not the kind of growth rates we generally see in modern reptiles.
As well, the unformed joints of the baby's leg bones led to the conclusion that these Hypacrosaurs, like the Maiasaurs, were not able to survive without parental care.
If we compare the head of the bone, right here or here, we can see that it's nice and round in the adult, whereas in the juvenile, it's very flat-topped. And the reason for that is that in the embryo, there's still a cap of cartilage. It's the area where the bone is still growing. We believe that when this dinosaur was born, it was relatively helpless. It didn't have well-formed joints, and therefore it probably needed to be cared for a period of time.
But the parents couldn't protect the little Hypacrosaurs of Devil's Coulee from every threat. There was danger right in their nesting grounds.
When these dinosaurs were living here 76 million years ago, the environment, of course, was much different than it is today. It was basically low-lying land along a major river system. It was probably forested. It may have been an open kind of forest. The nests were being built up on the banks of the river, so that when the river would go into flood periodically, it would flood out the nests. And as soon as the nests got covered by wet mud, of course, the embryos inside would drown because they couldn't get enough air through the eggshell.
Even the teeth of the biggest hunter of the area are now fossilized.
These were the animals that were preying on the big Hipparchosaurus specimens.
Albertosaurs were powerful predators. Their long curved teeth had serrations down the front as well as the back. These teeth were perfect for cutting meat, but they were also broad and strong enough to chomp right through bone. Albertosaurs were early relatives of the great Tyrannosaurus rex. Adult Albertosaurs could reach lengths equal to 2 of the biggest of today's elephants. Scientists assumed that Albertosaurs were solitary hunters because they thought that only individual skeletons had ever been found. But Phil Currie suspected that there might be more to the story. He'd read that an early fossil hunter had made a major Albertosaur find in 1910. But no one had been able to find the spot since. So Currie and his researchers set out to look for it.
For a long time, I had heard that Barnum Brown had found a bone bed in Alberta which was composed mostly of Albertosaurus.
Brown conducted his expedition in Alberta for the American Museum of Natural History in New York. Then as now, the river was the easiest route.
We floated down the Red Deer River, basically following the exact path that Barnum Brown had followed.
Brown had excavated the Albertosaur site. The bones had then been packed up and transported to New York for storage in the vaults of the museum. 85 years later, Currie examined the fossils there and realized that Brown had dug up parts of 9 different Albertosaur skeletons. Currie was determined to find the site. All he had were some old photographs.
One of them was a shot of Brown's camp in 1910, and it was right on the river. You could see his boat with the tent on it and his other tents in behind on the shoreline. And I thought, well, we might have a chance of finding that. This hill is quite distinctive and easy to spot on the photograph.
Today, the hill and surrounding Badlands are part of Dry Island Buffalo Jump Park in southern Alberta. The day in August 1997 that Currie found the spot turned out to be the hottest of the year.
Everybody had brought lots of water, they thought, but we ran out of water. Me being very stubborn, I decided, well, I'll just keep going. I'll look for a little bit longer, and then I'll go back. Well, it was actually several hours later, and I had penetrated much deeper into the Badlands. By the time I got to this hill, I was extremely tired, and if I hadn't been, I probably would have noticed that all over the hillside are fragments of bone. And those fragments are relatively easy to identify because they have the kind of texture and pattern and shape that says they're Albertosaurus. And I topped the crest and looked around and realized that this was it. This was the place. And I was so happy, but so tired at the same time, that I just dropped all my stuff and sat down on the ground and just looked at the scene in front of me. Where I'm standing right now is, in fact, the middle of Barnum Brown's quarry. And from that quarry, as small as it is, they managed to collect the remains of 9 of the 12 Albertosaurs we now know to come from this quarry.
The following year, Currie's team began excavating parts of 3 new skeletons from the Barnum Brown site.
The association of so many Albertosaurus, of course, does indicate that we probably have a pack of animals here.
The bones found by Curry's team ranged in size from juvenile to adult. These Albertosaurs had to be living and working together.
We have a lot of evidence to show that these animals weren't solitary hunters all the time. They, at least part of the time, did hunt in family groups or packs. The pack is composed of animals that are clearly at least half-grown to full-grown.
Curry was able to develop his ideas about the role that young Albertosaurs played in the pack by studying another find. This fossil was found further south along the Red Deer River in the craggy outcrops of Dinosaur Provincial Park. Albertosaurs hunted here, too. One of them was preserved as a perfect skeleton. Complete from head to tail, it became fossilized in the head-back position of its burial pose. It was probably about 5 years old and only half-grown when it died.
We can learn things about how they might have behaved by studying the animals. And for example, we know that when we look at the juvenile animals, that these were very long-legged, lightly built animals. There's absolutely no doubt that they were very fast. They could keep up to the adults. They were more agile and faster, and maybe they could take a different role in the hunt. Clearly the adults are specialized for the kill. I mean, they're animals with massive jaws. They could bite right through bone, but they wouldn't necessarily have been fast enough to catch their prey.
It's possible that the prey was pursued not by the large, slower adult Albertosaurs, but by the swift, light-footed juveniles. Working together, the juveniles could have driven the prey back for the kill toward the jaws of the waiting adults. The rich plant-eating dinosaur nesting sites were also prime hunting territory for a smaller dinosaur called Troodon. Troodon fossils are rare. Piecing together bones from a number of different finds helps paleontologist Dave Verricchio reconstruct the animal at the Museum of the Rockies.
So we put together here the skeleton of an adult Troodon. You can see there's a lot of missing pieces. And Troodon has been a mystery for a long time. It was first described almost 150 years ago. And even here, we've kind of tried to get close to a skeleton, but really we have parts of at least 4 individuals. So our knowledge of Troodon has really come in small bits and pieces.
This dinosaur had long hands with large claws on its 3 fingers. Its back leg and foot are delicately built.
Troodon's foot had 2 main claws that it ran on, and then on its inner toe, it had an enlarged claw. This claw was retractable, so it was held off the ground, and that way it kept the nail of the claw sharp.
This animal was a good hunter, able to detect prey with its large eyes. Its teeth offer clues about its diet.
Troodon's tooth has remained a puzzle. The serrations it has are unusually large and have a peculiar shape as well. So from the teeth alone, I think we'd guess that Troodon probably ate a wide variety of things. Probably ate some small animals, insects, and may also have eaten some plants as well.
Its foot structure, posture, and brain shape are very bird-like. In fact, Troodon and birds are members of the same ancient family tree. With so many bird characteristics, scientists believe that Troodon most probably had some kind of feathered covering on its body.
You can see Troodon's a not very big dinosaur. Its back leg, it's about as long as a not too tall, I guess not very tall, person.
As for the baby, it could have been held in one hand.
We have this baby bone. This is actually the upper arm bone from the embryo. So this is the baby that was actually found inside the Troodon egg. You can see it's quite small.
The little Troodon baby was found all curled up, still inside its egg.
So we're looking at part of an egg here. You can see some eggshell here at the bottom and some at the top as well. And this egg is really important because it preserves an embryo inside. It's really only on the basis of an embryo that we can identify an egg to a particular type of dinosaur. So what we're looking at is a troodon leg, an embryonic leg. You can see the thigh bone running here, then this long one here is the shin bone, and there's a portion of the foot lying underneath that. So we're looking at the left leg that's sort of folded underneath itself.
When its life ended, this baby dinosaur was just about to hatch.
The bones of the leg here are well formed, meaning that they're not cartilage, pretty much all bone. And that indicates that when this embryo hatched out, it could be very active.
The discovery of the troodon embryos provided the scientists with a different model for dinosaur behavior. Unlike the Maiasaur and the Pachysaur babies, the troodon hatchlings had strong, fully formed leg bones. They could fend for themselves without parental care. Troodon eggs were first found near Choteau, Montana, in 1979 by Jack Horner and his crew. The site was so rich in troodon eggs and babies that it became known as Egg Mountain.
We're sitting on the top of Egg Mountain, and this is the surface that we took off. This is the surface of a nesting ground.
The little mound of rock and dirt was a long way from deserving the title of mountain, but it did hold the remains of an intact ecosystem.
What we found here basically was just a grass-covered knoll with dinosaur eggs laying all over it. We started sifting through the sand and the sediments and started finding little baby bones and lots of eggshell, millions of eggshell fragments. After about 6 years, we had close to 300 eggs, hundreds of baby bones, and the world's first pretty complete dinosaur nesting ground.
Around 77 million years ago, Egg Mountain was a flat island in a vast lake. The lake was alkaline, too salty for fish to live in, but a good environment for nesting troodons.
And Egg Mountain itself was relatively close to the shore. The dinosaurs probably didn't have to swim, probably could have waded to the shore.
In the rocky sedimentary remains of the lakeshore, Horner's team discovered at least 10 clutches of troodon eggs. The most complete clutch was analyzed by Dave Verricchio.
This is a troodon egg clutch of about 22 eggs. And what was really neat about this particular egg clutch is that we found it inside a troodon nest. And that's a really rare find, to actually find the nest structure built by a dinosaur, in this case, 75 million years ago.
This is the actual rim of the nest that the dinosaur actually piled up some sediment. And the clutch of eggs was out here in the center of it.
Looked like the adult came, probably dug in the soil to loosen it up, and also kind of move some of that sediment away from the nest center.
The troodons would be laying their eggs, and I think manipulating them with their little hands.
We're actually looking at the products of troodon behavior, so how the eggs are arranged in the clutch. So you're actually looking at a real nest structure. To me, that's pretty exciting.
So this is, this is what paleontology is all about. Finding something that a dinosaur actually created.
In the carefully prepared nest, the troodon mother left evidence for Dave Verricchio about her reproductive anatomy.
And we think that troodon laid its eggs 2 at a time. And we can kind of see that the eggs have kind of a paired pattern. So it looks like there's 2 sets of eggs, 2 eggs, 2 eggs, 2 eggs, all the way around the entire clutch. And these eggs are kind of unusual in that the eggs are kind of long, but they sort of stick into the ground with their pointy end planted. And you can kind of see that in this egg clutch here. The bottom parts are missing, and we see the top parts of the eggs that would have been exposed in the nest.
Other clutches of troodon eggs are also clearly arranged in pairs.
How we explain that paired pattern comes from looking at modern animals, particularly those animals that are most closely related to dinosaurs.
Crocodiles lay all their eggs at one time. They are deposited in the sand in a big mass. On the other hand, birds lay only one egg at a time, but the size of the egg is much larger in comparison to the bird's body size. It appears that troodon's egg-laying was a mixed system, part reptile and part bird. The mother troodon had 2 reproductive tracts, like a crocodile, but from each side she produced only one egg, like a bird. She then laid the eggs 2 at a time, probably taking a number of days to lay all 22 of them. Another discovery revealed even more of this dinosaur's behavior. The leg bones of a fully grown troodon were found perched right on top of its nest of eggs.
Part of the leg that we found, this is the thigh bone. We have the shin bone, and then portions of the foot that were also there. And we found pretty much the back half of the animal, kind of from the waist down.
This adult troodon was actually brooding its eggs, keeping them warm and protecting them just like a bird. It is an extremely rare find, only one of 2 kinds of brooding dinosaurs found in the whole world. Troodon eggs and babies needed protecting. In fact, the skeletons of smaller predators are found at Egg Mountain.
This is the lower jaw of Alphodon. It's a small possum-like mammal that lived with troodon, and we often find some of the remains with troodon eggs. And you can see the several teeth in this lower jaw.
Like today's possum, the little mammal called Alphodon was probably scavenging on broken eggs. Lizards would also most likely have been preying on the troodon eggs. The fossilized remains of an ancient lizard, very similar to today's monitor lizard, were found right at the troodon nesting site. But the final threat to the baby troodons of Egg Mountain was their own environment. A flood of muddy water smothered the entire nest of 22 eggs. In the end, it was the muddy sediments that preserved the bones of the babies. Buried and turned to stone, their skeletons lay safe and protected. All that's left are some rare ancient environments and a few precious bones. But even now, it's still possible to catch a glimpse of how these animals actually lived. By chipping away at their fossils and releasing their bones. So the baby dinosaurs' world has not really disappeared. It's simply been tucked away until their stories could be told.